What's going on, y'all? I'm the Home Slice, Ascent Hyperion. It's no secret that one of the key defining factors of Halo gameplay has long been its weapon loadout meta. By this, I mean one of the key traits about Halo is that usually players all start with the same or similar weapons. This leads to certain weapons having a meta control over how gameplay is handled. In a previous video, I talked about the Magnum, Halo's first meta weapon, and how it helped outline the image of weapon metas for Halos to come in the future. But despite its importance in creating the Halo weapon meta, the Magnum was actually swiftly banished to the lowest rungs of weapon performance. In Halo 2 and Halo 3, the Magnum struggled to have any validity in the weapon sandbox. This was a consequence of changes in the weapon sandbox as a whole, but also as a side effect of the damage balancing inherent with dual wielding. But in late 2009, the Magnum would start to break free of its shackles that had held it down for nearly 5 years, and by 2015, the Magnum would sit atop its throne as the king of weapons once again, 15 years after the original reign. Today, we're going to discuss the epic revival of the Magnum. Before we get started, I want to invite all the viewers to join my Discord. This is one of the best ways to join me for my game nights, recording sessions, and to just chat with some fellow home slices. Join in using the link below. So, like I mentioned, this video is a follow-up to the video titled The Degradation of the Magnum. In that video, I talk in depth about the events and factors that led to the Magnum's both initial rise to prominence and its rapid fall from grace in the first 3 Halo games. I'll very briefly highlight those things here, but if you want more info, be sure to catch that video too. Like we discussed last time, the prowess of the Magnum was affected by 2 key things. First and foremost, the gun received very intentional debuffs in Halo 2 and Halo 3, as Bungie sought to install the BR as the dominant meta weapon in both games. Bungie was either unable to or had no interest in creating a more varied, less dramatic loadout weapon meta. Secondly, the gun had an inadvertent nerf as it was being adjusted for dual wielding. There are several mechanical things worth noting too, like how the Magnum could no longer scope in or how it couldn't perform reliably at range anymore. So, by 2009, the Magnum was in pretty bad shape. I mentioned in the last video that in 2010, with Halo Reach, we'd start to see the first dynamic step towards relevance for the Magnum, but actually I would be amiss if I didn't highlight the importance of Halo 3 ODST. ODST actually did some very key things for the Magnum. It returned the scope in feature to the gun and bolstered its range performance. ODST didn't really feature the BR as a key weapon, so much of the gap left by it was filled by the carbine and, most importantly, the Magnum. This was a great springboard for 2010's release of Halo Reach. The all-powerful BR had actually been left out yet again and replaced by the new DMR. The DMR is key to the success of the Magnum. With the effects of Bloom and the DMR's single-fire action, the performance gap between the resident meta weapon and the rest of the loadout sandbox was actually closed quite a bit. This closing of the gap was furthered by the Magnum's increase in validity in Halo Reach. Thanks to ODST, the Magnum retained its ability to scope in, and withstanding the effects of Bloom, its ability to perform at range was nearly comparable to the DMR needle rifle. Not exactly the same, no, but enough to make ranged Magnum engagements reasonable. The gun also featured a boost in shot time and packed enough punch to drop a guy even after missing a few shots, something the Halo 3 Magnum did not allow. In just a single iteration, the Magnum had recovered a lot of ground. While it still wasn't a meta choice by any means, for the first time in almost 6 years, the gun finally had validity when compared to other weapons in the loadout category. And last, but certainly not least, the removal of dual wielding released the damage delivery on the Magnum from some pretty tight shackles, giving it a massive functional boost as an individual weapon. The release of Halo 4 in 2012, however, didn't really do the Magnum any big favors. The gun remained basically functionally the same as it was in Reach, but when compared with Halo 4's set of loadout weapons, which included 4 unique precision weapons, the Magnum wasn't really a top runner. But I think it's very important to know that this was also the first time ever that the Magnum did not undergo a massive functional change. This was an indication of uptrend for the Magnum. This reservation of placement in the sandbox became a powerful springboard for what would be the single biggest comeback in Halo's weapon history. 2015 brings us Halo 5, and this is where we witness the revival of the Magnum to its former glory. The H5 mag featured a strengthened performance at range, a slightly reduced shot time, coupled with thick, heavy-hitting projectiles with a freedom from effects of bloom and wild spread that plagued its previous versions. Without a doubt, this Magnum was the strongest variant to emerge since Halo CE. But if you watched the last video, I pointed out that the CE Magnum retained such a solid spot in the meta because in several ways the gun was borderline broken. As you may recall, its shot time, range, and time to kill made it a disproportionate monster. So does the Halo 5 Magnum rise to power in the same way? No, not at all. You may recall from the last video that part of why the Magnum was nerfed so bad in Halo 2 is because Bungie was seeking to install the BR as the dominant loadout weapon. Like I said earlier, they were either unable to or had no interest in creating a more varied and balanced meta sandbox, so everything that wasn't the BR was notably worse off. Flash forward to Halo 5, created by 343, and we have one of the least severe, most varied loadout metas to ever exist in Halo. While some weapons are certainly better than others, there are basically no weapons in Halo 5 that are functionally useless. The Magnum in Halo 5 exists in such a way that it is a peer to the other precision weapons in the sandbox, not just an accessory or alternative. Much like how one would use the light rifle for long-range engagements, or the BR for a firepower superiority, the Magnum fills the role as the confident jack of all trades. It can perform well in nearly all aspects of being a loadout weapon without excelling too far in one niche. In fact, its well-rounded playstyle often makes it a favorable choice over other ranged weapons, especially depending on the user ability and competence. I talked at length before about how the Magnum's struggle to find a place in the sandbox was one of its core issues in Halo 2 and in Halo 3. That's what makes the revival of the Magnum so important. 343 didn't just boost the stats of the mag for fun, no, they very carefully developed it to serve an integral function in the Halo 5 sandbox. Deliberate action was taken to ensure the Magnum delivered a unique gameplay experience that was comparable and often superior to other weapons. This contrasts largely with its origin member, the CE Magnum, which was strong for the sake of being strong. In many ways, the H5 mag is what the Magnum should have been in Halo 2. It is the only true disciple of the original monster, but it's curated in such a way that the broken components are trimmed away and the core functions are retained and mutated properly. I think it's important to note this in the Halo history books. The Magnum is the only weapon to not only appear in every FPS Halo, it also is the only weapon to undergo such dynamic iteration in each game. For a series that introduces many new things, it seldom has made such extreme changes to its core weapons, and the story of the Magnum is a true standout timeline. The Magnum has sat atop the Halo 5 meta for about 5 years at the time of this video's release. In Halo's nearly 20-year history, the Magnum now holds the record for being Halo's most long-standing meta across all titles with a total of 8 years of reign. Followed by the BR at 5 years of reign. You heard that right, the Magnum has actually been in meta longer than the BR ever was. That's across all titles. I want to close out by saying the journey of the Magnum is a cool representation of how both intent and consequence affect game design. Its decline and revival both were not just the result of design choices by a panel of devs, they were influenced by the sandbox they existed in. Whether it were dual-wielding weapons, disparities in the meta, bloom, or much more, the Magnum was constantly in contest with its environment. While a weapon sandbox is designed with intention, it functions as a system of interconnected consequences. What else do you think works this way? That's going to do it for this video. Be sure to like and subscribe, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to slide into my Discord. Follow me on Twitter for Team Homeslice, and until next time, I'll catch you guys later.